Now available in paperback and e-readers, Esteem Horror in the Hamptons. The aspiring angel tries to escape a house of horrors in this action-packed, all-new Esteem series adventure. Get your copy of Esteem Horror in the Hamptons in paperback and e-readers at online booksellers everywhere. Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. New York City is implementing a new, more stringent policy on migrants that could lead to the eviction of thousands out of the shelter system.
Starting today, a major crackdown on asylum seekers under the care of the New York City shelter system.
Single adult male migrants now have to prove they're dealing with extenuating circumstances. This in order to stay with the system for more than 30 days.
Yeah, right now there are about 65,000 migrants in the shelter system. About 15,000 of them are single adult males.
And that means potentially 15,000 more people could likely be sleeping on the streets of New York. Eyewitness News reporter Joe Torres live in Midtown Manhattan with what could be another kind of mini crisis. Joe?
Well, Bill and Liz, the influx of migrant arrivals here in New York City has not let up. Some of them still here at the Roosevelt Hotel. 1,300 arrived last week, 1,100 the week before. The mayor and the administration say this latest update to their policy does three things: helps migrants in the next steps of what has been a lengthy journey, reduces the strain on the shelter system, and lastly, makes room for the migrants that are still to come. Here at the city's Migrant Processing Center in the East Village, it's the dawn of a new day for the men and women applying, and in some cases reapplying, for shelter. The city's latest, more restrictive eviction policy took effect today. Adult migrants given a 30-day eviction notice 1 month ago will be removed from the shelter system.
If we would not have done anything, we would have had 198,000 people still in our care instead of 65,000.
The city will evict about 250 migrants from the shelter system this week, and the number will grow to roughly 15,000 migrants currently housed in city-funded hotels, dorms, and facilities across the 5 boroughs. Under the new policy, those who reapply for a longer stay must now show they have extenuating circumstances or prove they've made significant efforts to resettle.
Every single week, we still get hundreds, if not thousands, of people coming into the system, and we need to make sure that we have the space to take care of the new guests that are coming into the city as well.
The new policy does not apply to migrant families with children. Nonetheless, advocates for migrants and the homeless quickly denounced the updated rules. Evicting families from shelter is not the answer to this crisis, read the statement issued by Wynn CEO Christine Quinn, who added, "Instead of scapegoating our newest arrivals, we need comprehensive reforms at the city level that will get families into permanent housing faster." The president of the New York Legal Assistance Group had this prediction.
We suspect as a community that they're going to wind up in the streets. I believe that we are going to see a rise in street homelessness this summer as the individuals receive a 30-day notice and they don't have extenuating circumstances to be able to stay in shelter longer.
So what are some of those extenuating circumstances? Well, here are a few. An upcoming immigration hearing. That'll get you a longer stay in the shelter. A serious medical procedure that you've got scheduled within the next 30 days. Or if you're 18 to 20 years old and you're currently enrolled in high school. Live in Midtown, I'm Joe Torres, Channel 7, Eyewitness News.
Now, according to reports, New York City is changing its policy regarding how long migrants can stay in the shelter system. And this new policy regarding single adult male and females basically makes it where those individuals are limited to only one 30-day stay, and they can only reapply for another stay inside of the shelter system under so-called extenuating circumstances. Now, these so-called extenuating circumstances would have to do with an individual looking to get themselves situated in this city in some sort of place, and that policy basically is one that is designed to make it where the individual would basically be kicked out of the system and wind up on their own. Now, New York Mayor Eric Adams says that he has to change the policy as related to migrants because the city just cannot handle all of the migrants coming into the city. And in order to make sure that migrants are able to get services, they have to limit the amount of services that migrants are currently receiving in the system. So what New York Mayor Eric Adams wants to do is basically, he's saying that he needs to make room for new migrants to come in by moving all of the old migrants out of the system. Unfortunately, as he looks to move these migrants out of the system, what is happening is those people's lives are going to be left in a limbo that could basically destroy the quality of life for New York City residents. Because once these individuals wind up out of the system, you're going to have at least 15,000 single adult men basically on the streets, basically further increasing the homeless population here in New York City. And if these individuals have no place to go, then the only place they are going to go are the streets of New York. And as they go on the streets of New York, they are basically going to wind up participating in all sorts of possible criminal behaviors, such as loitering in the subway and also participating in other crimes such as aggressive panhandling and possible shoplifting. Now, New York City earlier this year just got through a horrific crime wave that possibly, as I believe, continues to go on as related to individuals just committing all sorts of heinous crimes in the subways. And this whole flood of migrants being kicked out of the system could create and escalate an ongoing crime wave to epic proportions in the city. Now, combine these migrants who are going to be kicked out of the system within 30 days with the children of the corn who are coming out of schools this summer, and you could just have complete chaos in the streets that basically will be all due to Eric Adams' policies. Eric Adams' policies that go back as far as 2022, when he basically, in my opinion, started the entire migrant crisis. Now, back in 2022, New York Mayor Eric Adams and many other Blue Party mayors wanted to toe the party line, and as they wanted to toe the party line for the Blue Party, they wanted to go out here and spite Texas Governor Greg Abbott by saying that their cities could basically fulfill the policy of sanctuary cities. And as they look to make this fulfillment of this policy of sanctuary cities, they wanted to go out here and rub it in Greg Abbott's face that they could take care of the millions of migrants who entered the country illegally by providing them with city services. However, over the course of 2022, Eric Adams started out with a lot of braggadocio and was basically smiling as he waited at the Port Authority bus terminal for all of the buses that Greg Abbott sent to New York, basically looking to try to spite him, again, based on feelings. Unfortunately, as soon as March of 2023, that smile turned into a frown when he realized that the New York City could not continue to afford taking care of these migrants as they created strains on the fiscal budget. And according to Eric Adams, he said that the migrant crisis would basically destroy New York City. And that's what exactly happened, because as the city shelter system became completely overwhelmed by the just 30,000 migrants, not even the millions that Greg Abbott deals with on a weekly basis that come through the borders that have been open due to the Biden administration's lax border policies. What has happened is New York City basically wound up completely overwhelmed. And by the summer of 2023, the entire city, downtown Manhattan, Madison Avenue, where the Roosevelt Hotel was, again, this was a prime piece of real estate as far back as 2008, when my family member and I would go down to places like Brooks Brothers and Charles Turwitt to shop. This was a prime piece of real estate, but it was looking as squalid as a ghetto due to all of the migrants basically waiting to take an intake into New York City's already overburdened shelter system, looking for shelter services. And the entire shelter system has basically been overrun with migrants, and many of those migrants basically were staying inside of this shelter system. And Eric Adams, as he was overwhelmed, realized that he could not really take care of all of these individuals, as the entire theory of sanctuary cities got completely shattered and completely debunked. It got debunked because the whole idea of providing sanctuary to those who enter the country illegally is beyond that of a local province to be able to care for, because provinces have limited budgets as related to taking care of city services. So it basically proved that this needs to be in the hands of the federal government, which is better equipped to be able to take care of these individuals under Immigrations and Customs Enforcement, also known as ICE. And many leftists were left with egg on their face, because they were the ones who said that ICE was a racist organization, when in actuality ICE was a bureaucracy designed to be able to vet individuals effectively, and also an organization be able to care for these individuals by having the federal resources to deal with them at the first boundary of the United States, which is our border. And many leftists now are looking to try to find a workaround to the failed policy of sanctuary cities, and Eric Adams has been trying to find a workaround to the failed policy by going out here for the last year, looking to again go to the border to try to deter people from coming to New York. Unfortunately, many of those individuals had been watching years of old reruns that were from 30 years ago of Friends and Seinfeld and Sex and the City, and they want to live the New York American dream that they saw on TV, and that Eric Adams basically promised them early on in 2022. So all of those people continue to keep coming, and as they keep coming, Eric Adams basically is completely overwhelmed, and looking for a workaround to a policy that is clearly a failure, that he bragged about and is seen on video, basically opening and giving a red carpet to all of these migrants who now basically are being passed out of the system, and again being passed out of the system because Eric Adams can no longer use them as a virtue signal to be able to show how his party is not like the racist Red Party, and he cannot also use it as a covert contract towards getting a better job with the Biden administration, because the main reason why New York Mayor Eric Adams wanted to bring all of these migrants to New York City was because he didn't want to provide sanctuary to them. It was again about creating that covert contract where he hoped to gain brownie points with Joe Biden, and hoped that Joe Biden, on seeing him do such a good job taking care of them migrants, would be somebody who would pick him for a position in his cabinet for his 2024 presidency if he got a second term. Unfortunately, over the last 2 years, Eric Adams basically has alienated a lot of people, not only in the public, which he started doing when he first became mayor by continuing to maintain a vaccine mandate that alienated 1 million black New Yorkers who lost their jobs. He further started to alienate more people with this migrant policy, and as he alienated a lot of other people in big positions, such as Joe Biden, who basically wasn't paying attention to his virtue signal, basically Eric Adams thought he could jive his way out of this whole migrant situation, but he hasn't been able to jive his way out of this migrant situation. So now he's doing the classic beta male move and looking to create a series of elaborate rules in an effort to try to work around the failed policy, and looking to work around this failed policy by going out here and saying, oh, the migrant only has 30 days in the system, and after that 30 days, they no longer are a part of our system. And what he's doing there is passively making it where he can say, oh, I helped the migrant by helping them get a start. But aggressively, what he wants to do is be able to work around the failed policy and basically kick the migrant back out on the street. and have his hands basically washed as related to the entire affair. Because Eric Adams clearly knows that when it comes to a migrant getting their life together, they're not going to be able to do it in 30 days because under federal law, it takes at least a year for somebody to be able to qualify for working papers and to even qualify to stay in the country. Moreover, when it comes to a person who is applying for asylum, it's going to take some time for them to get situated. And usually even if they take one of these off the books jobs, these jobs are not going to pay weekly. No, in many cases, many employers are going to want to wait at least a month to pay this person for this job, and they're going to want to wait a month to pay them. So this person really will be ass completely out. But according to Eric Adams, his hands are clean after 30 days because that was as long as that person was going to be in the system. What he wants to do, again, is say after 30 days, this is you on your own, basically hanging this migrant out to dry and hanging the migrant out to dry like a pair of washed drawers with whisk, Clorox, and Downy, saying that they did their part passively but aggressively, leaving this migrant in New York City, with no support and no resources, and basically making it where this individual will be in the streets of New York, basically a part of the overall homeless population. And as a part of the growing homeless population, they can say that they have no more accountability for this entire situation, basically putting the person in a worse position than they were before, and basically putting the city back on the road to a decline in the quality of life. Because what's going to happen now is that once those 15,000 men who are just single are just kicked out of the system, they are going to be on their own. And as they're on their own, they're going to be back on our subways, sleeping and loitering in the subways. They're going to be in the vestibules of banks, sleeping and loitering there. And they're going to be just standing around looking to solicit and panhandle people. And that's going to make the quality of life in New York City go down tremendously, creating an increase in possible crime. That's going to make things even worse for New Yorkers as related to their everyday life. But Eric Adams, on one side, will be able to say that he basically solved the problem as related to the migrants, but the whole thing is his solution makes a bigger problem for every person here in New York City. And the only solution that should have been on the table basically would have been to turn the buses around. But Eric Adams says, oh, he can't do that because of state law, not understanding that New York City is under federal law and under federal jurisdiction. And the sanctuary city laws basically in and of themselves are unconstitutional. They're unconstitutional because, again, we have the supremacy clause in the U.S. Constitution, which says that federal supersedes state, and New York City basically looking to try to do the job of ICE basically was them violating the U.S. Constitution. And it's clear to me that from the complete failure of the migrant situation, we clearly need to let ICE step in and do its job. And New York City, again, these politicians don't want to do that because it means, one, they would have to swallow their pride on their far left ideology on taking care of those who enter the country illegally. And two, it means that they would have to admit that they put illegals over U.S. citizens. And three, it would mean that they would possibly lose the next election. And what Eric Adams is hoping to do is create a workaround, hoping most New Yorkers would have a short attention span regarding all of his failed policies and his quest to virtue signal in an effort to spite Donald Trump. But most New Yorkers are remembering all of his failures as related to the migrant crisis and the way he basically let New York City run into a ground, turning prime real estate in Midtown Manhattan into a straight ghetto, and possibly is going to turn New York City back into that ghetto once more, because when you've got 15,000 males with no jobs, no way to get one due to their paperwork, and no shelter at all, you've got a recipe for chaos. And this, combined with all of the children of the corn who are going to be getting out of the public schools, is going to create a very chaotic situation here for the summer of New York City. And this is what Eric Adams, again, doesn't want to talk about as related to the migrant crisis. Now, he wants to sit there and say, oh, migrants can work as lifeguards. No, they can't work as lifeguards, because in order to work in this country, you have to have your paperwork. And that's been the thing that has undermined most of the entire sending all these migrants everywhere. We have a process for working papers as related to the federal government. Again, I stress federal because federal supersedes state. And no matter what governors like Kathy Hochul or mayors like Eric Adams want as related to speeding up that process, the process for immigration's customs and enforcement just cannot be changed, because that has to go through Congress, and that's not going to happen anytime now because we have a red majority. So the whole process is basically stuck. And if we do have, and with Joe Biden's approval rating at an all-time low, this whole situation is going to be a disaster for New York. And what Eric Adams wants to do is, again, kick the can down the road to avoid accountability for his failures. He wants to try to go out here and say, oh, we did passively do something for the migrants, but now aggressively, after 30 days, it's out of our hands. Again, the same excuse he made as related to repealing the sanctuary city policy, a policy made up by blue politicians who don't want to concede that their entire approach to immigration is a complete failure on the level of prohibition, a complete failure on the level of Jim Crow laws. They don't want to admit that their policies just don't work, and they don't want to admit and acknowledge the failures that they've made. And as they look to avoid taking accountability, they are sending all of these individuals out on the street and putting up their hands, saying that, oh, they did nothing wrong at this point, and leaving it to average, everyday New Yorkers to deal with these individuals who, again, will be on our streets, basically causing chaos, again, by just being there with no place and no purpose. And this is why we needed to have gone and dealt with this at a federal level, because when it comes to the borders, we do need a boundary at the federal level to be established before we have any sort of talk as related to these so-called sanctuary cities. Again, sanctuary cities that basically take resources from citizens like foundational Black Americans like myself, take our tax dollars and give them to individuals who entered the country illegally and make them a priority before us. And that's the kind of policy that basically has Eric Adams basically on the point where his approval rating is in only under 28%. And has him on the road to being a one-term mayor. And this further reinforcement of these failed policies. Again, he's looking to make room for more migrants, but most voters here in New York are looking to make room for a new mayor, because it's clear that this one really has shown how incompetent he is and how much of a failed leader he is, because he basically led the city into a chaotic situation that he continues to deny by saying, oh, the city has the money. Well, how could you have money when you were running deficits with the de Blasio administration? How can you have money to take care of migrants? Where did this money magically appear? Critical question I would like to ask the mayor. Where did all this money come from when you were running deficits all the way from de Blasio, even in the COVID era? All of a sudden, we've gotten profitability when the city was struggling, and even New York State right now has a $4 billion deficit. I mean, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors here as related to New York City's failed policies regarding migrants and many other things. And again, the problem is that Eric Adams is in such denial that he doesn't even know that he's lying. And this is basically making life here in New York a living hell for most New Yorkers. Most New Yorkers are in a hell, and this policy, again, again kick all of these migrants out of the shelter system is going to make life just that much harder for New Yorkers who are going to have to be dealing with congestion pricing, which will take more money out of their pockets and basically make life more miserable in a city that was considered the Big Apple, but is soon, under the policies of these blue politicians, turning into the big piece of crap. Turning into a piece of crap because the leaders here basically do not know what they're doing, and again would rather virtue signal and look to try to find a way to work around their virtue signaling, basically showing us how incompetent they are, because this policy basically turns a bad situation and makes it 10 times worse. Now, if you would like to pick up some of my positive black fiction on the SJS Direct imprint, like the ISIS series, the Steam series, the John Haynes series, the books of the Spinsterella trilogy, my black vampire novel Eternal Night, my black sorority novel The Thetas, or my black business novel Recipe for Success, you can find those books along with my men's issues books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft to Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can send a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS, Amari's Revenge. The goddess next door is confronted by a Nubian queen out for revenge at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in this inaugural ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS Amari's Revenge in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere. Now available in paperback and e-readers, ISIS Dark Incubus. The goddess next door gets enthralled in a romantic entanglement with an evil incubus in this all-new ISIS series adventure. Get your copy of ISIS Dark Incubus in paperback and e-readers today. Now available in paperback and e-readers, John Haynes' Illuminati. The man who rules the world takes on the head of the global elite in this all-new action-packed John Haynes series adventure. Get your copy of John Haynes' Illuminati in paperback and e-readers at Amazon.com and online booksellers everywhere.